Have you ever wondered what triggered the cataclysmic events of the First World War? In the heart of Europe, on a summer day in June 1914, the spark that set the world on fire was struck. Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria, heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, was assassinated in Sarajevo by a young Serbian nationalist named Gavrilo Princip. This assassination was the match that lit the fuse, setting into motion a series of events that would lead to the most devastating conflict the world had ever seen. The killing of Ferdinand was more than a political assassination. It was a catalyst that ignited the volatile mix of nationalistic fervor, militaristic ambitions, and complex web of alliances that had been building across Europe. In response to the assassination, Austria-Hungary, backed by Germany, declared war on Serbia. This act of aggression was not taken lightly. Serbia was a Slavic nation and had the powerful backing of Russia, a country that considered itself the protector of the Slavs. Russia was quick to mobilize its vast armies in Serbia's defense, and this move prompted Germany to declare war on Russia. Now this is where things get even more convoluted. France, bound by a pact to aid Russia in a war scenario, was drawn into the conflict. Germany, in a bid to quickly knock France out of the war, invaded neutral Belgium, bringing the United Kingdom into the fray due to their treaty obligation to protect Belgian neutrality. As these events unfolded, a domino effect of alliances being called into action swept across Europe. What started as a regional conflict in the Balkans quickly escalated into a full-scale war, with countries choosing sides, forming what we know today as the Central Powers and the Allies. And thus, the world found itself on the brink of a war unlike any seen before, a war that would change the course of history. Imagine living in a maze of muddy trenches, the stench of death in the air, and the constant threat of enemy fire. Welcome to the Western Front. The Western Front was a vast network of trenches, stretching from the Swiss border all the way to the North Sea. Soldiers on both sides lived in these trenches, enduring unimaginable hardships. Picture a world where the ground beneath your feet is a squelchy mess of mud, and the air you breathe is thick with the smell of decay. The trenches were a breeding ground for disease, with many soldiers falling ill from conditions like trench foot and dysentery. The Western Front was not only a physical battlefield, but also a mental one. The constant threat of enemy fire, the sight of comrades falling in battle, the deafening roar of artillery, these were the daily realities of life in the trenches. It was a test of endurance, a test of courage, a test of the human spirit. Even amidst this grim reality, there were moments of camaraderie and shared humanity. Soldiers would often engage in small acts of kindness, sharing their meager rations or comforting a comrade in his final moments. These were small glimmers of hope in an otherwise bleak world. The Western Front was also the site of some of the most brutal battles of the First World War. The Battle of the Somme and the Battle of Verdun stand out in particular. The Battle of the Somme, fought in the summer and autumn of 1916, was one of the bloodiest battles in human history, with over 1 million casualties. Verdun, fought in the same year, was a battle of attrition, with both sides suffering heavy losses. These battles, along with countless others, resulted in a stalemate on the Western Front. Neither side could gain a decisive advantage, leading to a war of attrition that would drag on for years. The Western Front was a living hell, a gruesome testament to the horrors of modern warfare. While the Western Front was locked in a deadly stalemate, the Eastern Front was a different story. Here the war was fluid, dynamic, and marked by swift and sweeping movements. The vast expanses of the Eastern Front provided a stark contrast to the cramped trenches of the West. The initial stages of the war saw Germany and Austria-Hungary, the Central Powers, pitted against Russia. The Central Powers had a strategy in place. They aimed to knock Russia out of the war quickly and then redirect their forces to the Western Front. Early on, they enjoyed a string of successes. The Russians, despite their superior numbers, were ill-equipped and poorly led. The Central Powers capitalized on these weaknesses, launching successful offensives and capturing vast tracts of Russian territory. But while the Eastern Front was significant, it wasn't the whole story. The First World War was not confined to Europe alone. It stretched its tentacles to far-flung corners of the world, and the battles fought in these regions had a significant impact on the overall outcome of the war. One such area was Gallipoli, a narrow peninsula in Turkey. The Allies launched a major offensive here in 1915, aiming to secure a sea route to Russia. The Gallipoli campaign, however, turned out to be a costly failure for the Allies, with heavy casualties and ultimately a withdrawal. The war also engulfed the Middle East. The Ottoman Empire, an ally of the Central Powers, faced off against the British and their allies in a series of battles. The Allies aimed to secure control of the Suez Canal and the oil fields of the Middle East, both of strategic importance. The fighting here was fierce and brutal, marked by harsh desert conditions and guerrilla warfare. The war was truly a global conflict, touching every corner of the globe with its destructive reach. From the frozen steppes of the Eastern Front to the scorching deserts of the Middle East, the First World War left an indelible mark on the world, shaping the course of the 20th century. In 1917, a new player entered the battlefield, tipping the scales in favor of the Allies. As the fires of the Great War raged on, the United States, initially determined to remain neutral, found itself drawn into the conflict. Two pivotal events sparked the American decision to enter the war. The first was the sinking of the Lusitania. On May 7, 1915, a German submarine launched a torpedo that struck this British passenger ship, claiming the lives of over 1,000 people, including 128 Americans. This tragedy outraged the American public, straining the nation's patience with its policy of neutrality. The second event was the interception of the Zimmermann telegram. In January 1917, British intelligence intercepted a secret German diplomatic communication proposing a military alliance between Germany and Mexico against the United States. This audacious plan was the final straw that broke the camel's back, leading President Woodrow Wilson to ask Congress to declare war on Germany. The entry of the United States into the war had a significant impact. The arrival of fresh American troops bolstered the weary Allied forces, providing an invaluable boost in morale as well as military might. These doughboys, as they were affectionately known, brought with them the spirit of American determination and resilience. American industrial strength also played a crucial role. The US ramped up production, providing the Allies with a much-needed supply of arms, munitions, and other vital resources. This arsenal of democracy, as it was later termed, was instrumental in maintaining the fighting strength of the Allies. The United States' entry into the war marked a turning point in the conflict, shifting the balance of power decidedly in favor of the Allies. But even as American troops brought renewed energy and hope to the Allied cause, they found themselves stepping into a war of unprecedented horror and brutality. The arrival of American forces marked a turning point in the war, but the worst was yet to come. In 1918, the guns fell silent, but the echoes of the war would resonate for decades to come. The Great War, as it was then known, ended with the signing of the Treaty of Versailles. This treaty, however, was not a guarantee of peace, but rather a harsh imposition of terms on Germany, a move that sowed the seeds of discontent and resentment. Germany was held responsible for the war and was burdened with crippling reparations. This economic strain, coupled with the loss of territory and military restrictions, left a deep scar on the German psyche, setting the stage for the rise of extremist ideologies. But the effects of the war extended far beyond the political and economic landscape. The human cost of the war was staggering. Millions of lives were lost, and countless more were irrevocably altered. Families were torn apart, and entire generations were marked by the physical and psychological toll of the conflict. In the immediate aftermath of the war, the world also grappled with the Spanish flu pandemic, a health crisis that claimed even more lives than the war itself. This deadly disease spread through the trenches and military camps, and eventually reached every corner of the globe, adding another layer of tragedy to an already devastated world. The political map of Europe was redrawn in the wake of the war. Empires crumbled, new nations emerged, and ideologies shifted. The seeds of communism took root in Russia, and the stage was set for the ideological battles of the 20th century. The First World War was over, but its shadow loomed large over the 20th century. It was supposed to be the war to end all wars, but was it really? The harsh terms of the Treaty of Versailles, the immense loss of life, the Spanish flu pandemic, and the political upheaval all served as potent reminders of the war's lasting effects. and a stark warning about the consequences of global conflict.